One. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Kim Havens, the event manager here at An Unlikely Story. I'm so delighted to welcome Kelly Rimmer virtually all the way from Australia to talk about her new novel, The WARSAW Orphan, with Kristin Harmel, which was just released today. Yay! Happy birthday, book birthday, Kelly. Before we start, I'd just like to point out the Ask a Question button, where you can enter any questions for Kelly or Kristin. If you lose sound or your video, just refresh your page and it'll straighten itself out. If you would like to purchase any of their books, just click on the green button at the bottom of your screen and it'll take you to our website with the complete list of their books. Kelly Rimmer is the worldwide best-selling author of contemporary and historical fiction, including The Secret Daughter and The Things We Cannot Say. As I said, Kelly lives in rural Australia with her family and a whole menagerie of badly behaved animals. Her books have been top 10 bestsellers in her home country of Australia and have appeared on bestseller lists, including the Globe and Mail and Toronto store lists in Canada, and on top of the New York Times bestseller list, the Wall Street Journal, and USA Today here in the United States. Her stories have been translated into dozens of languages and can be found in bookstores all over the world. Kelly will be in conversation tonight with Kristin Harmel, the New York Times, USA Today, and #1 international best-selling author of The Book of Lost Names, which is now just in paperback, The Winemaker's Wife, and a dozen other novels that have been translated into 29 languages and are sold all over the world. Her new novel, I got a copy. It's The Forest of Vanishing Stars. It will be out July 6th, and you are definitely 100% going to want to read it. It is so good. It is stunning. A former reporter for People magazine, Kristin has been writing professionally since the age of 16, when she began her career as a sports writer, then moving on to People magazine while still in college, spending more than a decade there, where her favorite stories were the Heroes Among Us features. Kristin was born just outside Boston and spent her childhood there, as well as in Columbus, Ohio, and St. Petersburg, Florida, where she joins us today. After graduating from the University of Florida, she spent time living in Paris and Los Angeles, and now she lives in Orlando with her family. I have been binge reading Kelly and Kristin's books. I started out with The WARSAW Orphan, and then I moved into The Forest with Forest of Vanishing Stars, and now I am halfway through The Book of Lost Names, and I cannot even recommend their books highly enough. They are so beautifully written. The characters are so real. You'll just lose yourself in the story. They've both broken my heart. The WARSAW Orphan is inspired by the real-life heroine who saved thousands of Jewish children during World War II and takes place in Warsaw, Poland in 1942, both inside and outside of the Warsaw Ghetto. I'll stop fangirling now and turn the stage over to Kelly and Kristin. So welcome, Kelly Rimmer. Hello. And there is Kristin Harmel.
Hi, thank
Awesome.
you.
Hi,
Thank you so much for having us. Kelly, I know, right? Wait, we should just sign off now. Like, how?
That's enough. It's all downhill from there.
But buy the book, everybody. We're out, right? Well, Kelly, I am so honored to be here with you tonight because I am such a big fan of The WARSAW Orphan. I got an early chance to read it. I loved it so much, and then you blurbed my book too. We had like this great, just little author connection. It was fantastic.
Yes. And I tried to get all of my verbal fangirling out of the way before we started this chat, but I don't think it worked. I'm so happy to be here with you, and hello everybody. It's so exciting that you're all here. I've been reading the chat, and it's welcome from all over the place.
Yes. No, it's so great to see everyone, and so nice to be with An Unlikely Story tonight. This is so great, and I'm so excited. Yes. Today is the actual launch day of your book in the US, right?
Yes, that's right. I slept through most of it, but I'm awake in time for this.
Well, you were saying, what time is it now in Australia?
So it's 10 a.m. It's just just past 10 a.m. So this is so civilized. It's such a nice time to have an event. But I did kind of I was awake late just in time to see lovely people start posting, happy publication day. And then I went to sleep, slept through your day and woke up to do this at the end of the day. Nice bookmarks, bookends.
I feel like that's actually the exact right way to do a launch day. Because I feel like my launch days, I wake up in a panic and then just panic all day long. Like, what can I do? I should be doing more. Like, I don't know what to do. But you get to sleep through it. So, yeah.
Oh, I know. It's so true. And my friend actually said to me last night, well, I mean, you can just go to bed because everything's going to happen or it's not going to happen and there's nothing you can really do now. So just have a good sleep. And I thought that's really good advice. It really is.
All right.
That's all out there now.
I'm moving to Australia. You've convinced me. We're going to be neighbors. I'm so excited.
Come on over. It's great. We've got great coffee here.
Oh, fantastic. You have great coffee. And I know you have good wine. So I'm covered.
We do. That's true too. Yes.
All right, Kelly. So for everybody out there, can you begin by telling us a little bit about the WARSAW Orphan?
Sure. So it begins in 1942 and we meet Amelia, who is this she's a teenager, she's just about 14 and she's at that stage of life where, when you're young and you count not years, but 13 and a half or, you're always looking to the next milestone. So she's very young and she's in this unique situation where she may be in danger. Her brother has been executed for assisting Jews in hiding. And at that point, the penalty was not only the person who was actually doing the resistance work would be executed, but their whole family. And so her adoptive parents don't know if she's in danger or not, and they have chosen to flee with her just in case to keep her safe. So she's in Warsaw in this quite comfortable apartment a few blocks away from the Warsaw Ghetto, and she's living under an assumed identity. So she's living as Elżbieta Rabinek, and her world is quite small. She's quite contained within this apartment for the most part. But once a day, she gets this brief window of time where she can go and sit down in the apartment courtyard and get some fresh air and have just a little taste of safe independence. And being 13, she begins to rebel. And she doesn't want to take any crazy risks, but she starts to spend time with a neighbor, which is not what she's supposed to be doing. And through that neighbor, she kind of accidentally discovers this whole scheme to save children who are trapped within the ghetto. And so that's our Amelia / Elżbieta. Through the work that she does with that neighbor, she meets a young Jewish boy, Roman Gorka, and he and his family are trapped within the Warsaw Ghetto. And I have to admit, when I started researching, I knew that the Warsaw Ghetto was a bad scenario. It's just about as bad as it could get, but I had no idea. I just had no concept of it. And so through Roman and through Elżbieta's work with her neighbor, we kind of get a glimpse of life within the ghetto.
It was such a powerful book, and it was so so different than anything I had read before. And I was so interested, and I am so interested. Where did you come up with the idea for this? Because it is different. And that's one of the things I really like about writing World War II and reading World War II is there still are these stories that we've never heard before and that just that surprise us and captivate us. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like people occasionally will say to me like, oh, but there are so many World War II books. Why do you keep writing in that genre? And it's like, well, the stories haven't been told yet. I mean, there's so much to uncover. Can you talk a little bit about where you came up with the idea for this?
Yes, but first I just have to do a quick little shout out to The Forest of Vanishing Stars, because that's exactly what I loved about it. It is such a unique take, and there are there's kind of segments of the genre that are similar. There's you get these same patterns that emerge, but I feel like you could write 1,000 stories set during World War II and not run out of shocking and new takes on what people survived. And I think you would still be discovering things that horrify you, and you'd still be discovering things that inspire you. Yes. So I get a bit ranty when I get those comments, because it's such an important period, and I'm really happy that there's an interest in it, and that people are still writing about it. So the idea for this one, I actually wrote another novel set in Poland called The Things We Cannot Say, which I noticed that lots of people.
We're going to talk about that in a minute too.
Oh, thank you. Well, when I first started thinking about that book, I wanted Amelia, who is kind of the protagonist in this book, was a minor character in that book as it eventuated. But when I first was thinking about it, I had planned for her to go to Warsaw and to get involved in this work based on real life Polish heroine Irena Sendler. And as I started plotting it, because I'm an obsessive plotter, I send my poor editor. See, we have so much in common.
We do. It's going to be great,
this, everybody.
Well, especially after I move to Australia. This is going to work out perfectly.
Exactly. Well, as I was plotting it, I was getting my very, very long outline ready to send to my long-suffering editor, and I realised that it was just not going to fit. And so I took that subplot out, and I just forgot about it. I didn't think about it for years, for 2 years. And I was doing book clubs for The Things We Cannot Say, and I was doing one in my hometown, Orange in New South Wales, Australia, obviously. And I went to this amazing book club that's been meeting for 2 decades, and they're all really close. They meet every month. They do a themed lunch every month and have their book club around it on a Saturday. Oh, wow. And they had all of this lovely Polish food, and they bought some Polish vodka, and it was all very nicely done. And when I walked in, they were all swapping family stories. And this one particular woman, her grandmother had been smuggled out of a ghetto in Hungary in a suitcase. And there was just this little flare of remembrance, I just thought, I remember I wanted to write about Irena Sendler, and similar story, different setting. But I, did the book club, and we had some very nice food and vodka. And at the end of the book club, the very same lady said to me, "Can't you write a sequel?" And I said, "Well, no, because that story is self-contained. There's no loose ends to write about." And she kind of eyeballed me and said, "Well, can't you just write Amelia's story?" And the thing is, I knew I could, because I had already kind of planned so much more for her. And 2 weeks later, I'd written my outline, and off it went to the editor, and away we went. So I really credit her with reminding me that I had something there that I so desperately wanted to write about. And I'm bombarded with ideas all the time. Most of them are terrible, and sometimes they emerge though like that, where it's just the muse kind of grabbing you by the shoulders and shouting, "Write this book, please."
Yes, so and like the universe sending you that sign that you need to be doing it.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about The Things We Cannot Say. That was a huge, huge international hit for you. I mean, congratulations! Like, what an amazing.
Thank you.
What an amazing experience that must have been. What drew you to write that? What drew you to talk about, or to write about World War II Poland in the first place? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. My maternal grandparents are Polish Catholic. We're Polish Catholic, and I grew up. My mother, went back to work when I was small, and I spent a lot of time with my maternal grandmother in the first 5 or 6 years of my life. And some of my earliest memories, actually most of my earliest memories, are with her in her house, and with her food. She used to drag me to Polish language mass, and I would sit there and listen to this language I didn't really understand, looking around the church. And I just have all of these beautiful memories of time with her. And then she passed away, and my maternal grandfather had passed away. And as I got older, I wished that I could have an adult conversation with them. Obviously, there's so many questions that I would love to be able to ask them. But it wasn't until I was pregnant with my son, who's now 12 this year, so it was a while ago. And we have this our kind of throwback to Polish culture is this big Christmas party every year, where all of the cousins and aunts and uncles on that side of the family gather. And it used to be Christmas Eve, our Christmas Eve celebration, when my grandmother was alive. But after she died, we scattered, and we're all up and down the east coast of Australia. And so most of us come to this one event in early December. Hot, summertime, Australia, kids in the pool. Yeah. And it's always uncomfortably hot. So we're all standing around in this backyard, and there's Polish food everywhere, because we really make an effort we have the sledzi, the pickled herrings, we have the pierogies, and it's all just such a great celebration. And my aunt often will have wafers posted to her, like communion wafers posted to her from Polish cousins. So it's kind of our, remembrance of my grandparents and that side of the family that is still there but so far away. And this one Christmas, I was just standing there and I'm looking around, and it suddenly struck me how many of us there were. I thought, there's more than 50 direct descendants at that point of my grandparents. So two Catholic Poles came to Australia, and here we are 2 generations later, and there's 50 people all directly descended from them. And the only thing we have in common is that we're Australian, because there's this very diverse group of people. They live all over the place. And I thought, how did we end up here? And I didn't know. And I thought, hang on, why aren't we Polish? Like, why aren't we in Poland? And so that kind of led me on this journey, which was nearly 10 years long, of being really fascinated with World War II, you know, the experience of Polish Catholics, and just wondering what they might have been through. And I was really scared to write this book. That book just was the biggest undertaking I've ever kind of committed to, because writing about World War II, as you know, and as you, it's such a responsibility. And so every now and again, I'd go to pitch it to an editor, basically that same idea, and I go, no, not yet.
Wow.
And then so it lived in my mind, and I lived in this story for a really long time before I wrote it. And I'm quite a rational person. I'm not spiritual in any way, but I felt my grandmother so much with me as I was writing that book. And I went to Poland to research it with my aunt, who was translating for me. And we managed to find my grandmother's childhood home. And it looked just like the place in my head. You know, there's the house in my head that I'd planned for the character to live in was basically my grandmother's house. That's incredible. I had these moments of just intent, like even now I get shivers thinking about it, all these parallels. I'd already written a chunk of the book before I went, and so many things, like we found a cousin who told us my grandmother had been taken for forced labor at 14, which we didn't know. And my story already had this parallel with my main character's brothers, and it just felt like I was meant to write it. And then when it's been resonating, and people have been buying it and being so kind about it, and I just kind of feel like maybe my grandmother from whatever afterlife there is just like leaning on the scale for me, just like, you know, she's just pushed it out into the world a little bit for me. So it's a special book, and I just feel so incredibly fortunate to have had the reaction that it's had. I just can't explain it. It's just amazing.
Well, it's so deserved, though. I mean, it's such a great book.
Thank you. That's too kind of you.
You know, it's interesting to me that that had to do with your grandmother, because that was what led me into writing about World War II also.
Really? Yeah.
My first World War II novel, The Sweetness of Forgetting, which came out in 2012. I wrote it in like 2009, 2010. I come from an Irish Catholic family on my mom's side, but on my dad's side, I have a Jewish background. So there's kind of both forces at work. But The Sweetness of Forgetting was about a young woman and her grandmother, and the grandmother was fading away due to dementia. And that I was writing that as my grandmother, as we were losing my grandmother to dementia. So there's very much that relationship in there. And I've always thought, just like what you said, that there was just a piece of her kind of with me. And, you know, you mentioned about kind of knowing these things that you couldn't have known, right? Like, but that must have come from your grandmother. I was writing The Forest of Vanishing Stars, which is also set in Poland. And there are elements of that book that I had no idea were actually part of my own family history. I had no idea that I had family from Poland until I was about midway through writing the book.
That
Isn't that
amazing.
Crazy? From like the same area of Poland. It's nuts. Like the idea of, you know, these stories being in your blood, it just it just blows me away. Okay, but back to the Warsaw Orphan. I'm so interested. I wish we had like 2 hours to dig into this. And everybody out there, if you're enjoying this chat, please put your questions in the Ask a Question box for Kelly, because we'll be taking those in about 15 minutes. I know she would love to answer your questions too.
Yes, please
Although
do.
Selfishly, I would just love to just hog the whole chat to myself, but that doesn't seem very fair.
You are way too kind.
Well, especially because we're going to be neighbors in Australia now. So I'll just ask you all those questions over coffee and wine in Australia. And maybe some Polish vodka. All right. So in the Warsaw Orphan, tell me, because this book goes beyond just World War II. And I think then it segues into things that, you know, the World War II, even though your story is a different kind of story, I think we all kind of understand the parameters of World War II, but you continue the story on. Can you talk a little bit about post-World War II Poland and what made that a compelling place to continue your story?
Yeah, this is something that I'm so conscious of, that most of the rest of the world was celebrating the end of the war in 1945, and Poland just rolled on into this whole new occupation that didn't end until 1989. And I thought, if I'm going to write particularly about Warsaw, because that city just endured this relentless bombardment of crisis. You know, it was occupied. There was the Warsaw and the ghetto uprising, and then the whole city uprose, and then it was demolished. Like, it just was one thing after another. And then the Polish people had to endure this communist occupation that took, you know, till so many decades to fall. And I thought, I can't write a book set in Warsaw and not kind of acknowledge that the war just kept going in a different phase.
That's such a good point.
So you as a novelist, you want the end of the book to be somewhat uplifting. You don't want people to put it down and walk away and just be like, oh, I never want to touch one of her books again. So but there was no natural, you know, there's and there is hopefully an uplifting ending, but it wasn't like I could have, there's a big, we're all dancing in the streets, it's over, because that just was not what it was like in Poland. So I decided I would write about, and it seemed natural for my characters, particularly Roman, to continue his journey into that phase and to have to evolve with it. And so that was actually the hardest part of the book to research. And, you know, and there were twists and turns that happened during that kind of segment of the book that I hadn't anticipated. It was as I started digging into getting what I could about those early communist years, and just being kind of shaken by some of the things that I discovered were happening in the time. And so that was a real kind of journey into the unknown. And when I decided I'd write that part of the book, I had no idea how hard it was going to be to get research about it. It wasn't that I regretted it, but I was kind of going, you know, what have I done? A third of this book is set in a time, and I'm knocking on doors and there's just like empty static behind it, because, you know, suppression of information is so important. But there's been lots of good research done, and I was able to find out what I needed to find out ultimately. But it was just that moment in the beginning of, Kelly, you could have picked any other time in history.
You know, much like deciding to write about survival in a forest during a pandemic, because I was like, how, like, what am I doing? Why? Like, I've written all these books set in World War II France. I know World War II France. I could have done that blindfolded, right? But this is the year that I should go to a forest in Poland. Yeah, I understand. Well, talk to me a little bit about, you know, one of the things that really struck me in the Warsaw Orphan. Oh, and I'm going to interrupt myself. To all of you out there, before I ask this next question, I just want to remind you all, if you're enjoying this chat, if the book sounds intriguing, which I absolutely promise that it is, I wholeheartedly 100% recommend this one. Please do consider buying it tonight from An Unlikely Story. You know, it's these bookstores put on these events for us. You know, they do all the legwork behind the scenes. They do the promotion. They're giving us the opportunity. They're giving me the opportunity, really, to just like a stalker, ask Kelly everything on my mind. But if you want to support, you know, me as a future stalker and Kelly as a future author, no, but do consider buying her book tonight from An Unlikely Story, but definitely buy it this week if you can, because those first week sales really matter. You know, we talk about that a lot. It's just such a great book. But anyhow, sorry, that was my little public service.
Wait. Also, while you're doing that, just add the Book of Lost Names to the cart, because you will not be sorry. And I think you've got signed book plates too. If I don't, I will. So I will definitely sell them, or send them. But really, priority number one tonight is the Warsaw Orphan. So good. Okay, so let me ask you this though. I felt one of the things that really struck me so much about this book, and that honestly made me a little bit intimidated to send you my book, was just the depth of the research, the way that I just felt immersed in a world that I 100% believed from page one. And that's not something I always experience right at the outset with a World War II book. Sometimes it takes a little while to get into the world, to trust the author. But with you, I just felt like, my gosh, she nailed it. Like every page was just saturated with just, oh my gosh, like just the color of the time and this incredible detail. Can you talk a little bit about your process in regard to that? I mean,
you touched a little bit on research, but I want to know how you get it so right, because I believed you were there, but you really don't look old enough to have been there in World War II. So I don't think that was it.
It's just face cream. It's all about that. I think I try to, you as a writer, you're trying to paint a picture, and it's really hard to figure out where the balance is between too much detail and not enough detail. That's true. And so it's a constant juggling act, especially once you start getting excited about a particular topic. Yeah. And so, I overwrite my books. All the best writers do, apparently. My poor long-suffering editor again. So there's always too much fill in there, and my process kind of is, I've got the outline, and I kind of chop that up into scenes, and then each scene kind of gets, it's almost like a meditation that I've been doing. So I'm researching and I'm pulling all the little bits of detail from the research, and then you're trying to really visualize it for yourself. Yes. What can I see? What could I smell? What am I hearing? Yep. And then put all of that into the book, and then take half of it out, because you want to make a framework, because you're trying to connect with a reader. You don't want to tell them everything. You want to give them enough data that they can picture this world so unlike their own. Yes. But they're not going to go, oh my goodness, this is 15 pages about the same alleyway. I can't, it's too much.
You're right.
So, And also there's something magical about, I think the things we cannot say really ran this home for me. I was trying to paint a picture of my grandmother's house, because I was so moved and so amazed by that whole experience. Yeah. But you really only want to give the framework. You want people to fill in the gaps with their own experiences and their own imagination, so that it feels vivid to them. And so it's a process of research, write, delete.
Yes, same here.
So that's inefficient.
Yeah, but what's left behind on the page, at least in your case, is so beautiful. I mean, it was.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was just stunned by the level of detail, but the way that it felt delivered so naturally. Like you said, it wasn't like 15 pages of description. It was just enough, but it was enough that it just felt entirely real. I was just so impressed.
Thank you.
Given the success of The Things We Cannot Say, was it tough a little bit to follow that up with this? I guess I just mean, as an author, I don't know if you do this, but I get in my own head a lot, and I put a lot of pressure on myself. I doubt myself a lot. And I think, as much as we'd like to think that a huge success would just pave the way and everything would be easy in the future, I think it can also do the opposite. It can make you, it can almost paralyze you with fear. Was that the case for you with this book?
Yeah. The late night conversation with my friend about, have I done enough? Is there anything else I should be doing? And she's saying, it's out of your hands now. The book's going out into the world. And I think I once had a conversation with an author who she just had some success with her book, and she said to me, "Oh, I'm so relieved. My career is set. It's only, it's only up from here." And I thought, I can't tell her the truth.
Oh, don't tell her. Let her just believe it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you meditate.
I often say and it sounds really pessimistic, but it's not. But every new book is a new chance to fail, and it's not pessimistic. It's just the reality of the industry. You're trying to build a connection with people so that they kind of follow you through your career. But things happen, and these times are really unpredictable, and you just have to hope for the best. And really, the part that you and I control is what goes in the pages. Everything else is kind of like between fate and booksellers make and break them, and librarians, and you have to kind of trust that you've done the best job you can, and be proud of the story for itself, not for whatever happens after it's released, because that's all out of your control. And it sounds like I'm really humble sometimes, but I'm not. I'm as egotistical as any other writer. It's just that I'm aware whatever success I get is down to a great team at the publishing house. It's 100%. Down to readers believing in you, and you know how it is. So you're kind of really conscious that if you've had a great publishing career, so much of that is because you're working with a great agent and a great editor and a great team, because they really know how to do the stuff. And I don't. When I get my covers, I'm like, oh, that's pretty, but I have no concept of whether or not it's going to paint a picture. And they, you get the, can you give us feedback? What do you think? And I'm always like, oh, it's it's an image. I don't know.
It says my name. That seems right. You got that. Yeah.
It's the right title. I can't see any typos. Let's go.
No, it's so true. It really, you know, and I kind of think one of the interesting things about that too, like to me, that just hearing you say that means to me you're going to be around doing this for a really long time. Because,
thank you.
I mean, plus the fact that your books are extraordinary, but I feel like that's exactly the right perspective to have because, you know, I don't know. I feel like there's also something to be said for working your way up to that success and realizing, you know what I mean? Like realizing that it's a climb and that you can fall as easily as you've climbed up sort of. So
exactly.
That's amazing. And now I know we can absolutely be best friends. So, you know, I'm booking my Australian travel tomorrow to come and live next door. All right. A couple more questions and then we'll open it up to the audience questions. So for all of you, please plug your questions into the Ask a Question box so we can take them in just a few minutes. Okay. Couple of last questions. One, why do you think Why do you think World War II stories continue to resonate to such an extent? I just feel like the genre that we're writing in, or the subgenre, really is having a moment in the sun right now. Why 80 years, 75, 80 years after World War II, are people embracing these stories? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons. I think our grandparents' generation is kind of at the end of their life, and a lot of stories are dying with them. And so I think, and there's been some really terrifying studies about what young people know about World War II and how they understand the role that the Jews played. I read one study that a certain percentage, I think it was 10% of the young people surveyed thought that the Jews caused the Holocaust. So there's some insane disconnect between what like our generation learned.
Us old folks, yeah.
We grew up with grandparents who had direct experience, but our children are not growing up with the same same connection. And so I think part of it is that, and an awareness that time is moving and these stories are potentially slipping away. But I really think that these quite chaotic times that we are living through, I think that we seek stories of human resilience, and we seek perspective, and there's no, every single time I read about a real life person through World War II, there's an ability to survive and a determination to survive and to thrive and growth and love and family. You know, people found ways to exist in meaningful ways, and so I think it's a combination of all those things. And I think it's a really good thing. I really think it's fantastic, because even if I always say, I don't want people to feel like they've read my book and now they know about that era. Like maybe it will pique your interest, but go and read some, like, you know, sources, you know, novelists, we take, you know, we're writing a story and you might move dates around and you might, you know, you're probably making minor errors. So don't take a historical novel as like a reference book, but be aware that these events happen, and then do some research of your own and some thinking and pondering of your own. So I hope that's what the outcome is, but I really think it's a very good thing that there's so much interest in World War II.
I totally agree. And you're right. As a novelist, it's our job to engage people's hearts and to spark their interest. And then what they do with that is kind of up to them as far as where they go. Okay. I love that. That was like better than any answer I've ever given to that question. That was fantastic. Okay. I'll
write it down for you. You can use it.
Please. Yeah. I'll just put it like on the right side of my screen. I'll be like, you know, squinting into it as I say it. All right. I'm going to ask Kim after this next question to come back and maybe read us some of the questions. But one last one from me to you, Kelly. What do you hope that people take away from the Warsaw Orphan? And I hope that everybody here tonight, or this morning in your case, will go out and buy it, because it really is just such a beautiful, wonderful book. I hope you'll get it from An Unlikely Story. But what do you hope we take away from it?
Yeah, I hope there's a little bit of that interest in in Warsaw and all of these amazing things that happen in the city, and a little bit of awareness that, there has been a lot of fiction written about World War II, and Poland is probably not quite as glamorous or as intriguing as some of the other settings that have been well captured. I'm looking at you, France. But it was still important. Yes. And Poland actually suffered the most catastrophic loss of life, and their country was basically, demolished and rebuilt. If you go to Warsaw today, it is this beautiful, thriving city. They have rebuilt their cultural institutions. There are memorials. It is just a glorious place. And that is what I hope people take away from it. Just as people rebuilt, countries rebuilt, people are resilient. We are strong even when we don't feel strong. So if I had to condense it down into it, obviously I can't do short answers.
No, I love your answers.
If I had to condense it, it would be the human spirit is resilient, and whatever it is that you're going through, there's you've got something innate in you. Our grandparents were a generation that were strong and rebuilt. So that's probably it.
And what a perfect answer, and what a perfect thing to be reminded of today. As we're finally emerging from this pandemic, and re-entering life and kind of trying to find our footing, I think being reminded of that resilience is more important now than it has been in years.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Kelly, I loved your book so much, and I just hope everyone else gets their hands on it. And I know they're going to love it as much as I did.
Thank you. It's been such a joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
And now I can't wait to hear your answers to these questions. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy.
Kristin set a pretty high bar, you guys, so I hope that these questions are very, very Kristin.
She is so good. Kristin, you are so good. You're gonna have to do all of our historical events. So Meg would like to know, she says, I love that you brought Amelia into this book. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to bring her into this book for the new story you wanted to tell?
Yes. I loved writing her, and I wanted so much for her to have a bigger role in The Things We Cannot Say. She intrigued me. She kind of came out of nowhere, and I was so fascinated by the thought of a child growing up in those circumstances, but a child with quite an innate sense of curiosity and creativity that just kind of emerged over time. And so I was so delighted to dip back into her, slip back into her skin as I was writing this story. But I also wanted to make sure that this is a standalone book. If you haven't read The Things We Cannot Say, it makes sense. And that was really important because it's not actually a sequel. And so I was very carefully making sure that I was hopefully giving the reader all the information so that the context would make sense. But she's a character that really has just become so vivid in my mind. So it was just such a joy to write her again.
Oh, excellent. And let's see, Anissa would like to know, what is your favorite part of the writing process? Writing, editing, or researching, and why?
All of it and none of it. There are times when it's all hard. I'm close to deadline on my next year's book, which will be called The German Wife, and I'm just about to do this particular. I do lots and lots of drafts. I'm a writer who. I've got a writer friend who what she writes is basically what the editor gets. What my first draft is such a catastrophic mess. I don't even let anybody see it. I get really protective of my laptop. No, don't touch it. I don't want anyone to see. But I really like the drafts that I'm doing now, which are the pieces are all in place. I'm taking out all of those superfluous words. I'm adding in detail. I'm refining. I really like that because it's a time when I really feel like the world is all painted in my mind, and now I'm just going in and picking out which bits I'm going to actually include in what my editor sees in a few weeks' time.
I love that.
That is awesome. Okay, let's see. So a question here. No, you do not need to read The Things We Cannot Say before reading the Warsaw Orphan. So, Kate would like to know, Kelly, what's a book you've read recently for pleasure that you've loved?
Oh, I recently read this book called Sorrow and Bliss. It's by Meg Mason, and it's funny and heartbreaking, and she's got this really dark sense of humor. People kept raving about it to me, and I accidentally bought 2 copies because I forgot that I bought a copy, so I just just before I'm away at a Airbnb writing this week on a bit of a retreat, and as I was leaving, I pushed the spare copy into my sister's hands and I said, read it. It is so brilliant. And so it's about someone with a mental illness, but it's just so beautifully done. So I kind of want it's not historical, but I want everyone to read it just for I've got several people in my family with quite severe mental illnesses, and it really rammed home to me some of my own prejudices and assumptions, but it was a fun read. It was like hysterically funny. So I could talk about it all day, but I do. I hope it's published in the US. I think it would be. I assume it would be. And if not, you can order it from Australia. It's worth the wait and the shipping.
So there were a couple questions. Kate wanted to know, Kelly, do you have plans for your next book? So we know that is yes. And it's historical. It sounds like it's historical.
That's correct.
Or contemporary.
Yes, it's historical. It's another novel which is entirely historical. There's two points of view in the book, but they're both set in 1930s through the 1950s.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to read it. So Debbie has a question. She says, in The Things We Cannot Say, what was your reason for the subplot of Alice raising an autistic child? I love the World War II stories, but this added an additional storyline that was really interesting and moving.
Oh, thank you. Well, I had read, just by coincidence, I didn't seek out books like this, but I had read a series of books where the protagonist was on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I have a nephew who is, he's like level 1 ASD. So he's quite, he's super bright, super verbal, but has some challenges around socialization or social interaction. And my son and him have been really close from birth, basically. And I'd read these books and just bad luck. I just picked up a bunch of books where the autistic character was the butt of the joke. And at the same time, I'm watching my son engage with his nephew. And my son, I never had to really explain to him that Cameron's different or that he needs to be respectful. He shouldn't laugh if Cameron accidentally says something amusing. And I thought, why is it that in fiction it's so easy to write characters like this where the whole point of their autism is to amuse the reader? And yet in real life, Cameron represents a blessing to my family. There's challenges for my sister raising him, but overall, he's an amazing kid. He's a whole person with all different traits and all different challenges and all different strengths. And I thought I would like to write a character and a family who, dealing with the spectrum, dealing with the autism, but in a way that is where the child is never the butt of the joke, never, ever. And in a way that hopefully feels real to people who are raising kids on the spectrum. And I think, so I was, again, quite daunted to try and tackle that subject. And I'm sure I didn't get everything right, but I spent a lot of time with a friend who's a special needs, special ed teacher, and she spent a whole week with me helping me with the research and talking through different experiences that she's had in different families she's worked with and dynamics of families raising ASD kids. And so when people say, if people feel like I've captured something of their experience or something, that feels real, I always say the credit kind of goes to her, because she actually drilled into me so many aspects to like the amazing blessing that people on the spectrum are to us as a society, and how that reducing them down to a two-dimensional stereotype of their robots is so damaging to people on the spectrum and their families, and to us, to neurotypical people, because it means that, you start to view people through this really narrow lens. So that's where it kind of came from. And since then, I have another nephew who was born about the time I was writing it, and he's also on the spectrum, and he's mostly nonverbal. And I think I see so much of Eddie in him, but Eddie existed before he was kind of born. And I think hopefully it's a reminder to always see these children as unique and loved and lovable, not a stereotype. So that was where it came from.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you.
And Pat would like you to, she says, could you tell us about your writing room? And she says, thank you. Great discussion in books. I completely agree, Pat.
Thank you for coming, Pat. Thank you. I've got a tiny home. I live on acreage. So in the trees on my property, I've put this tiny home. And when I bought it, it was fairly rustic, it's fair to say. And the intention was always to renovate it and make it a really beautiful space. the pandemic has made it really hard to get trained people, and I'm so unhandy. I don't know which end of the hammer to hold, so I could do it myself. And finally, at the moment, there's a very patient builder who's fitting it in between his real jobs. So in a few weeks' time, I'll have a nice workspace again. And in the meantime, I've been working at the library, in my son's room, at the kitchen bench, and in an Airbnb. So not very glamorous.
And how about you, Kristin? Where do you write? What's your writing space like?
Well, I would turn my camera and show you, but you would be horrified by like the towering stacks of research books. Because like Kelly, I'm in the middle of drafting something. I write here in my home office. You're seeing one wall of it, which is bookshelves, which, you know, I've kind of set up for these virtual spaces. But yeah, it's the living room of my house, which we've converted into an office space. And it is filled with my son's, I have a 5-year-old, and it's just filled with all these little drawings he's done of like his, some of his favorite characters, and like, I love you, Mom. And like, that's just my little inspiration as I write. Plus like a few little French things, because I mostly write about France. Except when I'm writing about Poland. So.
So Kate would like to know, Kelly and Kristin, how long do you write each day, and when is your favorite or best time to write? Ooh, that's a good one, Kate.
Ooh, that is a good question. Kelly, you go first.
You go first. I've talked heap. No, I insist. You go first.
Oh gosh, it's your night. I'm the accessory tonight. So I write best in the morning. If you can't tell just from like me right now, I'm like brain dead in the evenings. Like the fact that I'm even stringing together sentences is nothing short of a miracle right now. And actually, honestly, one of the reasons I'm so exhausted at night is I wake up now between 5 and 6 to start writing. Because we never ended up sending my son back to school during the pandemic. So this whole last year has been me trying to write before he wakes up. And then I take him during the day while my husband works, and then I get weekends to write. So it's been a little bit of juggling. I think it's going to get better when we send him back to school in August, but I'm definitely a morning writer. And I right now I'm writing usually like 6 to 8:30 in the morning, but a lot of that's like responding to emails and stuff too. Kelly, how about you?
Wow. I'm quite an organized person, if everything except for my writing, which just happens scatter. Like it's just, you know, I don't have like a daily word count that I write to, and I don't have a set schedule. It's really funny. I don't know why my brain works this way, and it drives me quite bonkers because I would much rather be orderly about it, but it just doesn't come out that way. And so I've kind of learned to just accept that it just, I just can't seem to regulate it. And yeah, so there's not any set time. I'll write till midnight sometimes, and then other times it's early morning, and then other times it's just daylight hours. And I have days where I'll hike or something and I'm thinking about the story, but my word count is 0, but I actually have a really productive day. So it's just all over the place.
That's awesome.
All right. So I think we have one more question. I love this question. This is from Susan. What were your favorite books to read as a child?
I loved Roald Dahl. My daughter's just inherited this same obsession. Oh, I read Matilda so many times. I think there were passages that I actually knew off by heart.
Same.
I loved Heidi, and it was actually Heidi that made me want to be a writer, reading Heidi. Because I was living in Sydney at the time as a child, and I was in kind of Western Sydney in our little suburb. And I remember just going, I'm in Sydney. I'm in the Swiss Alps, and just putting the book up and down, just being like, how, this is magic. How has she done this? It was my first moment of just being in love with story. And then I really became quite fixated on Trixie Belden and Nancy Drew. And for my birthday last year, I was 40 last year, and we were in lockdown, and I had this trip to Tasmania planned, which we had to cancel. And I was quite sad. And my mum organised and bought me an entire set of the Trixie Belden books to surprise me, and it very much cheered me up. And then my kids and I read Heidi aloud over the next few weeks together. And those books still are remarkably special to me, because just the memories of just falling in love with books and just being so amazing. It's a lifelong it is quite remarkable that you can just look at black and white letters on a page and this whole process happens in your brain. It's just magic. It's so wonderful. So what about you, Kristin? What books did you love as a kid?
Well, first, I have to ask a couple of follow-ups. One is just a follow-up comment to that, which is that we all know pandemic birthdays didn't count, so you're actually still 39. So
I've been telling people this and nobody is buying it.
No, it's official. We're just declaring it here tonight. Kelly, have you seen Matilda the musical yet?
Yes, I saw it in Sydney a few years ago. Oh, I love it so much. Tim Minchin is obviously an Australian musician. It's beautiful.
The lyrics and the songs in Matilda the musical. Like I have the soundtrack and we listen to it in the car sometimes. It's brilliant. Like every line is brilliant. Oh my gosh, I love that musical so much.
Have you seen it? Have you seen it on stage?
I've seen it in London and in New York and in Orlando. So I've seen the traveling show, the Broadway show, and the West End show. Yes.
You've got the trifecta.
Except I haven't seen it in Australia yet. When I move there. When I move there, I'll see it.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So my childhood reading experience is really similar to yours. Nancy Drew was a very influential series to me. Certainly Roald Dahl. And then The Diary of Anne Frank. And I say this a lot in talks, but that was such an important book in my life. Not necessarily because of the subject matter, although clearly that was an influence and touched me and moved me. But I think it was so important to me because it was the book that taught me that books can change the world. So, and I, anyone who's been to my talks before has probably heard me say this 1,000 times. But prior to that, I used to think books were for entertainment, right? Like I read Nancy Drew, I read The Hardy Boys, I read The Three Investigators, like I read all those, the Bobbsey Twins, all those old series. And yes, now as an adult, I understand that I was learning from those books and learning life lessons. But at the time, I thought they were just enjoyable and fun. And I thought I would love to be a writer when I grow up, but I also want to change the world. And then I read The Diary of Anne Frank, and it was like the little light bulb went on, and I thought, oh my gosh, you can do both things at the same time. And so that book meant a lot to me and has, I think, stayed with me and really, in a lot of ways, shaped my life.
Oh, that's so lovely.
That just gave me goosebumps, Kristin. Wow. Oh my gosh, this has been so wonderful. I cannot thank you both enough. I will come on. You're all coming along and say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us on your book birthday, Kelly. This has just been so great.
An absolute honor. Thank you so much for hosting us.
Read the WARSAW ORPHAN. Book of Lost Names is in paperback now, just out in paperback. And The Forest of Vanishing Stars. Oh my gosh. So good. You guys are so talented and wonderful. Thank you so much for writing these stories and bringing us back into that history and just making it real and breaking our hearts. And so we never forget. And you guys are just so talented. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
And now I have signed, Cassie did chime in, and we do have signed book plates from Kristin and Kelly. So button, order all of their books, and we'll all just read together.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you for letting me spend time with my future Australian neighbor and best friend.
I'll get the block party organized. You're welcome.
I'm going to crash that
start
party.
Planning it now. Yeah.
That sounds like a fun party. Awesome.
This was so much fun. Thank you so much. And
congratulations,
Kelly.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. It's such a joy to meet you both. Thank you. Have a great evening. See you.